The first day of track action in Saudi Arabia is over, and the fastest driver on Friday was Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. It is absolutely shocking and unbelievable, I know. Who would have predicted Max fastest? But there was a lot of interesting things that happened on Friday and a lot of data to look at, and that is exactly what we're gonna do. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. The majority of viewers are not currently subscribed to the channel, and if you're one of those, I would really appreciate it if you just tap that little sub button. Now, let's get to the video. First off, seeing the cars negotiate their way around the Saudi Arabia circuits, in my opinion, is always a joy to watch. Even if some of the walls have moved back a little bit and the track has ever so slightly changed in terms of layout to make it a little bit safer and slower into some of the previous danger zones, it is still a joy to watch. The circuit is brutally fast and mistakes can and are still punished. But what did we actually learn from practice? Well, that is what we're going to find out. We're not going to be taking too much of a look at FP1 because that session, much like in Bahrain, is not representative in any way due to the climatic conditions being very different to FP2, and FP2 is very similar to what we'll see in qualifying and for the Grand Prix. But before we get into what we learned from FP2, let's talk about Ferrari, and how is this even possible? We're on round 2 and Ferrari is already taking a power unit penalty for Charles Leclerc. This is an absolute disaster for Ferrari and Leclerc. In Bahrain, after qualifying, Ferrari changed his energy store due to precautions, and we still don't know if that is salvageable. But in the race, he then broke down, and the brand new energy store failed, so they have to take a third energy store for the season, and because they only get 2 for the year, this means he has to take a 10-place grid penalty. Saudi Arabia is not one of the tracks where you really want to be taking a 10-place penalty, and that's not because it's impossible to overtake, but it is because the walls are very close. And those close walls mean mistakes are punished massively. For Ferrari, and especially Leclerc, they just need a smooth weekend here in Saudi. They have a great car, but if they don't have the reliability, then it's never going to work out for them. They just need to make sure that they can get to the end of the race and score some points. Ideally a top 5 finish at the very least. Not only this, but Leclerc is also taking a brand new internal combustion engine, as is his teammate Carlos Sainz. I just don't understand where the reliability has gone for Ferrari, but they really need to get on top of it soon. I mean, not even McLaren Honda was taking power unit penalties this early in the year. Now, let's get to what we learned from practice, and don't worry, I will be talking about Aston Martin, Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari shortly. But let's start with the teams that were towards the back of the field. Now, usually in F1, we have 1 or 2 teams that would occupy the back couple of rows, race in and race out. But this year, that doesn't seem to be the case. Last weekend, it was AlphaTauri and Williams that were looking vulnerable. But after Friday, this weekend, it seems to be Alfa Romeo who is struggling the most. But that being said, the gap is really tight, and one small mistake will see a midfield driver tumble down the order, which once again goes to show just how close the field is. The field was separated by just 1.449 seconds, which is even closer than FP2 was in Bahrain a couple of weekends ago. Last year, in FP2, the field was separated by 2.2 seconds. This tells me that Q1 is going to be very exciting, and that is something to look forward to, especially because it seems like that from practice, the drivers can do more than one fast lap on the soft compound tyres. In my previous video, I talked about how the surface in Saudi Arabia is much smoother than Bahrain, and this leads to the drivers being able to do more laps and, well, get away with a one-stop race, but it also means that in qualifying we could see the drivers put in 3 qualifying laps on one set of tyres because they are just that much more durable at this circuit. And the drivers will be glad for this because it is going to be very easy for a driver's lap to be ruined by traffic in the first part of qualifying, and we could see a couple of drivers who are not usually at the back find themselves there, which, to be honest, will be really good to see. So what about Williams? Williams had an interesting day, and it is fantastic to see Williams is not actually as bad as I originally feared they would be this season. Sargent was 18th and Albon was 14th, but there was only 1/10 between the pair of them, and Albon was only 2 and a bit tenths from the top 10. If Albon was able to gain that 2.5 tenths, he would have beaten Hamilton today. Williams is a very slippery car in a straight line, but we kind of already knew that from last year, and also by the fact that their car is a little bit more simple than the competition. This slippery car could play dividends for them in the Grand Prix. If they can get close to the top 10 in qualifying, then I believe that Williams could score points for a second weekend in a row. And why is this? Well, if they have a slippery car in a straight line, they will be able to do some overtaking in one of the 3 DRS zones. Not only this, but because they are fast in a straight line, it means that they will be difficult to overtake in the race. And with tyre wear not being very harsh, it is unlikely that Williams will be overtaken due to tyre strategy. Albon was very close to getting in the top 10. But one driver who did manage to get in there and beat some of the big boys was Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. Hülkenberg has had a brilliant start to the year when it comes to one-lap pace, and he managed to beat both Ferraris and the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. Now, I don't think this means Haas is going to be fighting Mercedes and Ferrari come Saturday, but it does show that Haas has some good pace over one lap. Hülkenberg's Haas was also very slippery, as he was one of the fastest cars in the straight line. But that being said, Haas still seems to be struggling over race pace, which means yes, they could be high up the grid after Saturday, but when the race gets underway, we could very well see them start to slip back down the order, much like they did in Bahrain, which is a shame. And no, I don't think we will see Haas score any points, much like we didn't in Bahrain. It does seem like Haas is the slowest race car at the minute, despite the fact they have a very good qualifying car. And that's a compromise that they need to sort out. They need to get on top of this and have a better race car. Now, what about Alpine? Alpine had a very interesting practice session. On the short runs, they were there with the fastest cars. Ocon was 4th and Gasly was 6th, which is a brilliant recovery because they didn't look so strong in Bahrain, and I have a feeling this could be track specific. Alpine still looks like a very stiff car and struggles with bumps. Therefore, with Saudi Arabia being a smooth surface, we are seeing a much better Alpine car, and this could be a great weekend for them to score points and maybe even beat 1 or 2 of the top 4 teams this weekend. But speaking of the top 4, it is now time to get into what you have all been waiting for, and that is, can anyone take the fight to Red Bull? And what is the order this weekend between the top 4 teams? Well, it might actually surprise you. By the fastest laps, it does look like things for Ferrari are very grim at the moment. Both drivers were only just able to make it into the top 10 on the fastest laps, and their runs in FP1 were not spectacular either. But in FP2, their race runs were much better than their quali runs, and they really need to be. With Leclerc taking a 10th place penalty, he is going to have to make his way through the field, and the only way he's going to be able to do that is with good race pace and a solid race car in a straight line. And the reason for this is because, as I said earlier, tyre wear at the Jeddah circuits is very low, meaning that tyre strategy will not be as important, and he will not get the opportunity to do multiple undercuts, like, for example, Gasly did in Bahrain. Luckily, it seems like on the long run for Ferrari, they are a little bit better than the Mercedes. And for Mercedes, this is a tricky weekend. I really didn't expect this. I did not imagine that Mercedes would be staring down the barrel of a Q2 elimination for Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton is really lacking pace. He was off of Russell pace over one lap, and even on the longer runs, Hamilton was struggling. There is still time for Mercedes to turn it around, and there are some positives to take away from FP2, at least for his teammate George Russell. As this graph shows, Russell was in parts of the circuit the fastest car out on track, but his teammate Hamilton was struggling. He was struggling with tyre wear, he burned through the sets quicker than anticipated, and it seems like Mercedes might just have to change the downforce levels on Saturday and opt to run with a little bit more wing, just so they can try and preserve the tyres just a little bit more. It is not the ideal compromise that Mercedes would be looking for, in my opinion, as Mercedes are trying so desperately to get in the fight with Ferrari, Aston Martin and Red Bull. What about Aston Martin? And this is the part of the video you're probably all waiting for. Can Aston Martin once again be in the hunt for the podium and take the fight to Red Bull? Well, yes is the answer in my opinion. Aston Martin once again had a brilliant Friday, and as this image shows, much like in Bahrain, we can see a similar pattern. Down the straights and when on full throttle, the Red Bull is the fastest car. However, when the cars get on the brakes and get to a stop, Aston Martin is just a beast. It is still the strongest car out there on the brakes, and on the long runs, Aston Martin is the second fastest car. Now, I did not think this would be the case this weekend, but Aston really do have a great car at this moment in time, and Alonso is on top form as always. And I really can see him getting his second podium of the season, and he might just have a chance to go one better than last time. But even though he did brilliantly, Magic Alonso was still no match for Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Perez also looked really good over race runs, but his teammate Max Verstappen looked incredible. Much like in Bahrain, Red Bull is kinder on its tyres than their rivals, and they are faster. They have pretty much unlocked the holy grail of going faster and using their tyres less. It's frankly a deadly combination. If Alonso can get between the Red Bulls, he could beat Perez in the race. However, I have a feeling that if it's a 1-2 in qualifying, then Red Bull are simply going to dominate the Grand Prix as well, because the only way Alonso can beat Perez is by disrupting his race. So, with Friday out the way, what have we learned? Well, the midfield is once again incredibly tight. One mistake will knock a driver down 5 to 10 places. Hamilton is struggling massively with tyre wear, and his one-lap pace is currently not great either. But his teammate, George Russell, is faring a lot better and can do very, very well. Ferrari seem a little bit lost. Their one-lap pace is not good, but their race pace is a little bit better versus their rivals, and that will help them in the race. And as for Aston Martin are the clear second best, with Red Bull being away on their own. So with this, what is the top 4 going to be after qualifying for the race? Well, I think Max Verstappen will be on pole position, with Fernando Alonso P2, Sergio Perez P3, and George Russell will be in P4. But what will it actually bring? Well, we're just going to have to wait and find out. I hope you've enjoyed this analysis video, and if you did, as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see what will happen on race day.